excited to roll into this next hour with you all. I have had the honor of interviewing our guest speaker a couple times. And I mean, if you don't follow her already on social medias, if you haven't subscribed to her newsletter, I want to get that out there. She's got really, really great knowledge that she's sharing all the time. This hour is going to fly by really quickly. And so I just encourage you all to go ahead and follow our guest speaker now. I'm going to pass the mic to her in just a few moments so she can tell you the best ways to stay in touch. But before we roll into our live Q&A, just want to go over some quick housekeeping guidelines to keep us all comfortable and confident in this next hour. So we'd love for you to participate. You could be doing anything else with your time, but you're deciding to be with us virtually, whether you're here live or you're rewatching. Please participate by dropping things in the chat. If you are rewatching, we do look at the chat. So the comment sections in YouTube or on Power to Fly. So feel free to make notes there if you're rewatching. If you're here live with us, feel free to turn on your cameras. No shame if you don't want to. There's no pressure because I know that video fatigue is real these days. But if you do need that extra invitation, we'd love to share some face-to-face time with you. So feel free to participate that way by turning your cameras on. Otherwise, just use the chat box, however you'd like. Any comments, any questions, reflections, tips and tricks of your own. I will be raising anything that pops up in the chat box to our guest speaker so that she can comment on them. If anyone at any point wants to hop off mute and voice their question or reflection or share some of their own tips and tricks, you are welcome to do that. Just give me a cue by either raising your emoji hand, or you can just send me a note in the chat, either public or private, letting me know you'd like to hop off mute. And when the time is right and as time allows, I will give you the invitation to hop off mute to speak with our guest speaker. Now, if you do hop off mute, you will be featured in our live recording as this is being recorded. And this is a good time to remind you all, if you signed up for this conversation, be looking out for a rewatch email that will include a link to this recorded conversation, as well as any resources, any links to resources that our guest speaker might bring up throughout the hour so that you all can easily access them there. If anyone has any sensitive information and you prefer to be kept anonymous, you can find me in the chat under Mariella Marie. You can write to me privately there, and I will raise your question or your reflection to our guest speaker and keep you anonymous. And the last thing I'll say is we'd love for you to follow Power to Fly on socials and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can keep up with all the great chats we've got in store for you. Now, before I pass the mic to our guest speaker, I'll just take a couple seconds to briefly introduce myself if this is the first time you're joining a chat where I'm moderating. So I love just reflecting on the importance of emotional intelligence at home, at work, and at play. So I might bring some of my reflections to that point. If anyone is interested in philosophizing or sharing, actionable tips on how we can deepen our emotional intelligence, please feel free to do so on this live conversation. Otherwise, I'd love to invite you all to support the project that I'm working on that is called the Positive Force Team. You can go to thepositiveforceteam.org, sign up for our newsletter, or I'm also happy just to connect on LinkedIn and answer any questions there. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to the Queen, Erika here, who is really, really full of knowledge. I mean, as I said before, when we first kicked off the session, if you haven't followed her already on socials or subscribed to her newsletter, she has a wealth of knowledge and just her content is always just so poppin' and beautiful. So I definitely recommend you all, follow Erika. And Erika, just to pass the mic to you, for those who have not joined a chat where you've shared knowledge before, can you share a little bit about yourself, why you do what you do, and also what you're excited to share today?
Yeah, so hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Power to Fly and Mariella Marie, and everyone who makes this community possible for us to share. I am a career coach or a career management strategist, and I believe women should excel at work and know their worth. So I help them with everything from asking for a raise, asking for a promotion, navigating challenging conversations, and just making sure that they can achieve career success on their terms. I also partner with organizations through their women's employee resource groups or business resource groups to help them develop, retain, and promote women. And how I ended up doing this kind of work honestly started long time ago, right? So when you're in leadership, you wear the hat of coaching anyway, because that's a part of what you're paid to do. But for myself personally, I found myself at a place in my career where I wanted better balance. And as a store manager, I could not go to church on Sundays because the bulk of the traffic was on weekends. So I strategically planned my exit. After a conversation with my district manager, I ended up giving them a 6-week notice, putting my resume online, withdrawing all the money out of my 401k and going on vacation. While I do not recommend that, sent my mother into orbit. It worked out for me. I was actually recruited into a different industry, banking, as a matter of fact, for a role that I never even applied for. And that changed everything. I said, if I don't know about the power of leveraging transferable skills, a lot of people don't. So that sparked a catalyst within me. And after I relocated to North Carolina, I started my business while still working full time, honestly, finishing up my bachelor's degree, helping people, again, excel at work, know their worth, and ultimately get hired so they can expand their career options and increase their salary.
Yes. So folks have submitted some great questions, and I just invite you to share as much of your story as you feel comfortable when responding to these questions,
Sure.
because I find that it's helpful to just see someone practicing what they preach, and also giving some insight on lived experience. So again, feel free as we roll into those questions. But before we start with the questions, Erika, can you set the stage for today's conversation? Just cover some of the principal themes for this conversation today.
Absolutely. So career management is so broad. I love the fact that we are at least attempting to, right, maximize the time that we have in the space today, to talk about tips to set your goals and evaluate them. Also, how to set a practical growth strategy and how self-advocacy can impact your career. Statistics and studies and research will show that women in the workplace a lot of times show up and do the work, but they're challenged with advocating for themselves. And I even dedicated a principle to that very thing in my book, Stop Sitting on Your Ask. ASK, ASK. My mother suggests that I spell that word just to make sure that everyone's on the same page, just to encourage women, especially, to ask, to not be your first no, because there's a 50-50 chance you'll get what it is you're asking for.
I love that. And I love your wise mother. You sent her flying when you quit, but now she's supporting her baby's book. So that's great.
Yes, yes.
I love that. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen here so I can pull up these awesome questions that folks have submitted previous to the conversation. Again, if you are joining and you didn't get a chance to submit a question, please feel free to drop any questions in the chat, any reflections in the chat. And as time allows, again, we'll get to those questions. Just a reminder as well, if anyone has any sensitive information, please write to me privately and I will raise those reflections to our guest speaker as well. So let's see here. Let's start with this first question. Let's talk about goals. Okay, so if you hear your question come up and you're here live with us, let us know that you submitted this question. We just want to make sure that we, cover all grounds here. And we'd love to just say thanks for submitting this question if you're live with us. So first question here, can you share some of your own professional goals? What are some examples of how not to set goals?
I'm just going to jump right in. Huh? So, gosh, let me just say this. At one point in my career, I did not set goals. I did not create them. I was very good and still am at interviewing well, right? So I knew that I could get hired. The difference between where I was at that point in time and what I do now makes a tremendous difference in terms of having clarity and setting goals. So one of my professional goals is to help 1,000 women before the end of this year, December 31st, 2022, make more money and or get promoted. So one of the things that I have done is created a space on Patreon where I share resources and I go live once a month to help women to equip, empower, and encourage them to have what I call money talks, those conversations in the workplace that will help them increase their salary, whether that's performance evaluation conversations, asking for a raise, negotiating salary, asking for a promotion. That is one of my goals. What I will say, since I've been on both sides of this equation, setting the goals and not setting the goals, is I definitely recommend writing the goal down or at least capturing the goal and taking it out of your head. Reason being, when you write the vision and make it plain, it allows you to focus in ways not doing so doesn't allow you to. There are so many distractions day to day. Life happens to everyone, and out of sight means out of mind. So I definitely recommend that if you are serious about achieving the goal, that you capture it, that you write it down, that you keep it front and center. I will also say too, when it comes to setting goals, what I recommend you not do is be so rigid as you are pursuing the goal and making progress, because you may have to make some adjustments. And a lot of times we get tunnel vision, and this is what we're going to do. This is how it's going to look. This is how much time it's going to take. And that's not always the reality. And the last thing I'll say about that is be mindful of your capacity, because if you're an overachiever like me and that part of you needs to be managed and coached, you may set too many goals, and then you end up being distracted by your goals, but also being discouraged because you don't feel like you're not making enough progress.
Oh, I'd love for you to crack that open. Maybe you will with some of these follow-up questions here, because it's just kind of like we're essentially being hard on ourselves. We're setting ourselves up to be that first no, as you said in your introduction. You don't want that to happen. So I love that you're like demystifying goal setting, essentially, so that we can, be our first yes. And
Yes.
Antoinette writes in the chat, yes, write the vision and make it plain. So great, great, great. All right, so let's move on to this next question here. What's the best way to set professional goals if you're not sure what industry you'd like to be in long term?
It's a great question. I would say if you don't know what industry you'd like to be in, before you set a goal, what you first want is clarity. So, really being clear on what your expertise is, what those skills are, and identifying a role first. And what you may need to do in order for that to happen is maybe perhaps take a career assessment. Definitely speak to people in different industries that you may be considering so that you can have a level of clarity. Once you've identified the role, right, and you are clear on, okay, these are the skills that are required, these are the qualifications, this is how I can position myself as a solution in that industry, then I would create a goal. Because if you walk into goal setting and you don't have clarity, then you will be working in reverse.
And just to also demystify, this long-term commitment, I would love to hear you speak to this, because, historically speaking, a lot of us, especially those of us who have been in marginalized communities, we see our parents and our grandparents, sticking to one thing forever and ever, even if they don't like it, but that's just been the way of the game. Any way to just relieve the pressure or the weight of, maybe I can be a little flexible in the future, so I don't take this burden or just take the way that folks used to do it, back when things were different. I'm rambling now, but I would just love to hear you speak to um, adding some flexibility there so that we don't get ourselves caught up in something just to make it long term for the sake of it being long term.
Yeah, that's a great question. And no, you're not rambling, by the way. And I love the fact that you said flexible, right? Because what worked for some doesn't work for all. And what works in one season may not work for the season that you're currently in. So, what I would say to that is, I actually posted on social media, it was either last week or the week before, like 5 common mistakes women have made and are still making when it comes to their careers. And one of those mistakes is that women do not play the field when it comes to their careers. So, from a flexibility perspective, I encourage women, especially, to test the market and make sure that you are in the right seat with the right org. Even in this conversation where, what has been making the news in some regards is job hopping, right? So when it comes to job hopping, it has been frowned upon in the past, but since the pandemic, it's like, okay, employers are a little more open to the fact that people are navigating their careers differently. So I encourage you just to make sure that, again, you are weighing your options, making sure that you have found the win that works best for you. And it's a mutual win for you and the organization, not just a win for the organization. Sometimes our commitment actually works against us, and we stay too long and settle.
Don't settle. If you didn't hear that, don't settle.
Please don't.
No, we need to know our worth.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, Logan. Yes, go ahead. You want to add about settling? Go for it. Go.
Can't hear you.
Did you want to hop off mute? Yes, we can hear you, but we see that we can't hear you. No, but I'll give you a second, maybe hop off, hop back on, and that might fix your audio, but we do want to hear from you. All right. Let's see. We do have some questions popping up in the chat. And as Logan gets his audio back, since you're speaking of, yes, go for it.
Okay, great. So, I joined this because I like to see things from every perspective as possible. And Erika, I cannot tell you, so many people get gaslit when they're told confident information. I literally was told by my former employer, and this is regarding, job hopping, that he wanted me to find a woman who would fill this position, who would keep her head down, be happy with small increases, and never leave. And he told me how to look for that in a resume. And he was like, we want someone who's been for long stints, is just going to be happy doing their job and pretty much never look for anything else. Just be happy with what we gave them. And I said, why? And he's like, well, it makes your job easier because you don't have to look for someone to replace this. And so, as someone who has left that job, and it was a good job for me, but it wasn't good for the people around me. And so if you've ever wondered, like, I'm here, I'm loyal, they're loyal to me, they keep giving me raises, don't settle. Because there are people who are friendly like me who are being told to do things to keep you satisfied enough so that you do settle. So if you've ever been in that position, get up, get out. I'm just telling you. But trust your gut on that, and trust Erika with what she's saying. Thank
you, Logan. And trust Logan on what he's saying, especially considering he was in an environment where that type of mindset was accepted and was expected. So, and this happens especially when women are interviewing and they don't ask for more money. Yeah. There are so many conversations that I have heard about behind the scenes where it was, we would have given her more had she just asked for more. But a lot of this, and I won't get us off track, goes back to childhood. KPMG did a women's leadership survey many years ago, like 2015, 2016. And they asked women between the ages of like 18 and 64, the lessons they learned while growing up. And some of those lessons included, and I actually have the stats because I put them in my most recent newsletter. 86% of respondents were taught to be nice to others. 77 were taught to be helpful, 77%, and 62% were taught to be supportive of others. So from a very young age, we have learned to look out for other people, but not necessarily speak up for ourselves and self-advocate.
Yes, thank you, Logan, for sharing. Yes, go ahead.
With that, I've personally seen that, Erika, and I want anyone who's listening to realize, just because the business or corporation or organization you're working with might seem exceptionally inclusive or diverse, don't expect them to immediately want to give you more money or more benefits just because, you are a BIPOC or LGBT person. Someone who's very close to me, my mother, works for a diverse organization, and she had never before, she's a Latina woman, asked for more money. And she did the first time, and they just gave it to her. And they told her specifically, they gave it to her because she was bold enough to ask. She was terrified, but she did it and it worked. You get what you ask for. And it does make us afraid sometimes, but when you already know the worst possible outcome is no, and you're okay with that, then you know what's on the other side of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Logan. Yes. I love that you're able to bring your personal lived experience and then also throw, your family's experience. just as another voice of reason. So thank you. This is definitely, a collective effort, and, Erika, and all of your expertise and all of your, your personal journey. I'm happy that, someone like Logan can add value from his lived experience and from his mother's lived experiences as well. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate this open dialogue. So this is great. I'm just going to highlight some things that are happening in the chat because we got a lot of things happening in the chat here. So let's do like a popcorn round so that we don't stay, because we have a lot of pre-submitted questions, but you are clearly getting the gears going here, Erika. So I'll start with this one here. How do you know when it's time to leave a position, especially if you enjoy what you do?
That's a good question. And I'm not going to say the first thing that popped into my head. If you enjoy what it is you do, and this is the tough part of these conversations because I can't ask the person one-on-one unless they want to come off mute. But if you enjoy what you do, the question then becomes, why would you want to leave that seat? If it's because I have mastered this level where I am, and I may be interested in a growth opportunity, or I may want to, Erika, as you said, test the market just to see. Believe it or not, there are some people who really enjoy what it is they do. And if you are fulfilled at work, if you feel like this is something you look forward to doing, then by all means, cultivate that where you are, because it is a gift. There are a lot of unhappy people in workspaces. What I will say also is, if you pose the question of when should I leave, then you've already had the thought. So nurture that thought as well, because that could be an indication that there's something greater for you, or that you are wanting more of something or something different.
I love that. And sometimes it's as simple as, this isn't intellectually stimulating me anymore. And that's perfectly fine.
Yes.
Sometimes it's, I don't feel safe. And of course, that is, you need to listen to your intuition, So there are lots of things that can trigger that question. And I definitely recommend for that person who asked to connect with Erika, because I think that she can definitely dive in deeper there with you. For the sake of time, we're going to move on to the next question, though. Okay, so Kenver writes, Erika, I set goals regularly, but how do you manage your goals in a toxic culture environment?
How do you manage them in a toxic environment?
How do you manage your goals in a toxic culture environment?
I don't understand how the environment prohibits you from managing the goal. So if someone wants to add more in the chat or come off mute, because when you set a goal, you have the responsibility for managing that goal. While I understand there could be some obstacles, there could be some forces working against you, but in terms of actually achieving that goal, if you can speak to maybe what the goal is specifically, or add a little more context, I'd love to dig into that a little more if we have time. I just want to make sure I answer the question properly.
Cool. So Kenver, if you want to hop off mute or add more to the chat, please do so that Erika can get some background info to answer your question. And since I don't see anything happening yet, I'll move. Oh, yes, perfect. Go ahead. Go for it. Did you want to hop off mute?
Yeah, I was saying that you work in an environment and you're trying to do your best, try to keep a positive corporate culture, but you find that senior management keeps the place very toxic because they manipulate people to get what they want done for them. You as a person, as a manager, try your best to empower your employees. So that's why I was thinking, how do you keep those goals in that kind of environment? I mean, for me, it's time I leave. I think I'm telling it's time I leave. But I'm saying, but there are other employees that are working well. You try your best to empower them. They're doing their best, and management is still breaking them down. And that's the part, that's the toxic culture of the place that I don't like.
Yeah. So it seems to me that the problem or the issue is the toxic culture, which a lot of times you and, of course, your colleagues, employees cannot control. What you can control is your response to what you're experiencing and whether or not you choose to stay. So I know that you mentioned, for you, it's probably time to leave. But for those who are not yet ready to leave and they come against resistance, when it comes to achieving their goals. Are we talking performance goals, or are we talking performance management goals? And I believe there's strength in numbers. So instead of, coming into work and just doing what it is we're required to do, it's building that support system internally and externally that's going to help propel you forward. That's going to help encourage you on those days when things get hard. Oftentimes we work in isolation. And as a result of that, it becomes very challenging in cultures like these. To not just achieve your goals, but to simply do your job. You want to make sure, and I say this for everyone, whether you're in a toxic environment or not, make sure that you have some relationship goals. Make sure that you have a success squad. Make sure that you have a mentor. Make sure that you have a sponsor. Make sure that you have allies, so that in those moments where you may be feeling the pressure, feeling the resistance, you have a space where you can get what it is you need to move forward and sustain yourself as well as your success.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Kenvard, thank you for hopping off mute. I know you're not alone in this situation, so I think that your question is very valid, and I appreciate your courage for hopping off of mute. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yes. Mary, you want to hop off mute? Go for it, please.
Yes, thank you so much for creating this space. I just had a quick question. So I'm currently navigating a job search. And so I've been getting the advice of, if I want to pivot into a new career field, I should get my foot in the door, rather finding a position that aligns with my skill set and years of experience. And so my question to you is, if you're looking to pivot into a new field, should we be looking for like entry level roles? Because I think about how that would impact an individual financially over time if you're constantly trying to get your foot in the door rather than growing in wealth. But anywho,
Great question, Mary Rose. And I was shaking my head as you were speaking, like, don't do it, girl. Don't do it. And it speaks to what we have been talking about, right? To a degree, which is settling. And I know that, for some people, they will speak to what they have experienced, which is take what you can get so you can get your foot in the door and then work up from there. But what if you could have gotten your foot in the door, but on a different level, and you settled? So if you are switching industries, make sure that your expertise is packaged in a way that speaks to the value that you deliver, not your comfort of going into a level of the organization that's less than what you deserve because of the unknown. So one of the other mistakes that I shared when I shared this post online is that we confuse experience with title. And that's not necessarily the case. So as I mentioned earlier, I went from, and I was in retail at the time, from managing retail stores to managing a bank. From there, I went from managing a bank to leading call center representatives, same industry. From there, I decided I'm retiring from leadership. I don't want any more direct reports. I want to be an individual contributor. And I became a client service consultant, same industry. But since I was working my business, working full-time, during that time, I also was a college and career readiness adjunct professor. So my degree is not in education, but I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew how to package my expertise to open the doors that I saw myself entering. The flip side of that, of course, is, a lot of us don't like applying for jobs online. We don't like the fact that, we're submitting our resumes. We may not hear from anyone, but I promise you, you will need not just the performance, not just packaging your expertise, but the people. If you don't have people in your network that you can give your resume to who have a level of influence and connection that can open doors that you can't access for yourself, that has to be a priority at some point in your career. And you, in turn, should be able to do that for other people as well. But again, whatever you do, please don't settle. You're welcome.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Mary Rose. Thank you, Erika, for that.
Steven said,
Beautiful
copy that in the chat. I'm sorry.
Yes. No, and Jasmine's like, that's what I need to learn to do. So people are clearly, needing this wisdom. So I appreciate the support. This is also a good time, since you're speaking of networking and just, having that support. For folks who are joining live, please feel free to use this time to drop your preferred ways of connecting in the chat, whether that be your LinkedIn, your websites, your projects. I've seen people drop emails as well. And then, you have about 30 minutes left to, connect with some folks, or at least open up those links that they're dropping, so that we can start to practice what we preach here, build meaningful connections, networking. Clearly we're all interested in the same topic, and maybe there might be someone who can advocate for you, or who can just feel like they have some resources to share. So please use the chat to do so now. Antoinette, I see you got your hand raised, so go for it. I love this. This is we're going to get to the pre-submitted questions as well, but Antoinette, I want to get to you.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Erika, this is wonderful. I'm actually doing one of these Power to Flies this Thursday, but mine is on tips for internal networking. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because so many times we think about just LinkedIn or only our social media, but I'm going to be speaking about the importance of networking internally once you're in a company, and just how to have, I didn't call it a success squad, so I like that you said that, but a success squad, allies, mentors, and sponsors, and the importance of that. Because if we don't begin to utilize that, lean in and lean on those people, you can miss internal opportunities that you may not otherwise even think are available to you. And we need to learn how, like you just said, Erika, to translate our skills from one industry to another, or whatever. I too worked in that call center space for AT&T many years, and supervised, managed, and was like, I'm over it. But I'm also a military veteran, an Air Force veteran. And so how you translate even those skills, right, into another industry, but to be able to advocate for yourself and say, this is what I bring to your table, and I deserve a seat at your table.
Yes. Thank you so much for that, Antoinette.
Sure.
And one of the things that comes to mind, and hopefully for those who are attending, if they haven't registered to attend your session this week, they'll be able to do that. When it comes to building those relationships, I actually created a course several years ago called Relationship Goals. And in that course, I encourage individuals to build their relationships from a perspective that I called HIVE, HIVE, horizontally, internally, vertically, and externally. So when you look basically at an org chart, if your company has one, and it's almost like, those mall directories where it's like, you are here, when you see yourself and you look above you, below you, to the left of you, to the right of you, who do you need to contact with? But then don't just stay within the organization, especially with LinkedIn. You are one click from somebody around the world, in your industry, in another organization, in your own organization, that you can connect with. So I am so glad that we are having these social capital and relationship conversations, because they're needed. And also, when it comes to being able to have these conversations, especially with people who are more senior than you, a lot of times when I'm in my coaching sessions, it's, what am I going to say? How am I going to position these conversations? And what I've come to realize over the years is we have not been taught how to communicate our value. We have not been taught to have the types of conversations that not just allow us to articulate our value, but to attract individuals to us. One of the things that I made sure that I did this week with those women who are in my Patreon community is I uploaded a competency document that literally has competencies and performance statements, so that you get a definition of the competency. So it's not just I've done the work, but you can now speak to those competencies that allow you to do the work, that are seen as valuable in your department, across lines of businesses, in the industry. So you can, yes, Put them in your performance evaluations. Yes, put them on your resumes. Yes, speak to them when it's time for you to have those money conversations so you can begin to see yourself differently.
Yes, I love this. I love that the chat box is lit right now. So many people dropping their preferred ways of connecting and also, just, singing your praises in the chat. I'm going to move on to previously submitted questions. Just for now, keep writing in the chat box, everyone. And as time allows, I will get to those, but want to make sure that folks who took the time to previously submit questions, we get to those. Let's move into strategy. So here is a question regarding strategy. How do I grow professionally if my current role does not give me the opportunity to expand within the organization? How will we know when no further internal growth is possible and it's time to go?
That was a lot of questions in one. Okay, I want to make sure that I answer them. So was the first part of that, I'm sorry, go ahead. I saw you holding your fingers.
We'll start with the first part, and then when you're finished with that. Yes,
okay.
Yes. And if you're here and you submitted this question, let us know here because this is okay. So this reads, how do I grow professionally if my current role does not give me the opportunity to expand within the organization?
Okay, so if you're looking to grow and you're talking about like professional development, I mean, you can research resources, and I won't just limit it to courses because maybe you like to listen to books. Maybe you want to participate in a program. You can definitely and should definitely be looking outside of the organization beyond your intranet or the portal that they have for development to fill the gap that you currently have as it pertains to your development. That's the first thing. What was the other part of the question?
I'm getting there. Second question, how will we know when no further internal growth is possible and it's time to go?
When you ask that question, usually that's the indicator. And I laugh because it comes up often in my coaching sessions. But what I will also say is make sure you do your due diligence before you leave and that it's not an emotional decision. I can remember one of my clients coming to me one time and she was like, well, Erika, I have been with the company for X number of years. Everybody's getting promoted around me. And if they don't promote me within the next 6 months, I'm leaving. And I said, okay. I said, so tell me about the conversations you've had with your leader and others so that they know you want to be promoted. She hadn't told a soul. She just thought that people would notice the work that she was doing and that she should be promoted. No. So when I say do your due diligence, I mean, if you've had a conversation with your leader to talk about those growth opportunities, those career goals you want to achieve, if you've set the deadline, you and or your leader, if you were given the specifics, you need to do this, and this is what will allow you to experience the growth you desire, and you did all of those things and nothing has happened, it's definitely time for you to consider your exit strategy. My question for you would be, why would you stay?
Whew. Yes. We need a little silence after that question because that why would you stay?
Sometimes we stay, too long.
And the age-old saying of closed mouths don't get fed comes up too with, not even asking or, expecting that people have your best interest at heart, which we would hope. But oftentimes we got to speak up, right? We got to share what we need. Otherwise, people don't know what we need.
That's so true. And we can't expect our leaders to know what we want and know what we need because there's different strokes for different folks. Even though I have helped so many women, get promoted and better manage their careers because I had my business and I was working full time. I didn't want a promotion. It's not that I didn't know how to get one. So in those moments when my leader would come to me and it's like, there's this great opportunity, I'm like, that's somebody else's blessing. That's not. He clearly knew what I wanted to do, which a lot of times, in addition to my full-time responsibilities, was being very involved in women's employee resource group activities, whether that was communications chair or the enterprise professional development leader. I made the conscious choice to communicate where it is I see myself short-term and long-term with the organization. And then those instances when I needed something different, I would have a conversation with my leader to see if I could be supported in those ways. We have to speak up.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. We've got about 20 minutes left. And so I just want to remind everyone, I see lots of folks dropping their LinkedIns in the chat. Be sure to grab those because the chat will be closed after this session. So, as we're listening in, make sure you click around on those LinkedIns. Please be respectful as you make your connections and let folks know that you joined the same conversation. So that can maybe kick off some conversation from the jump. Let's continue talking about,
Question.
Erika.
I'm
yes,
sorry.
You got it. Come on, you got a
mic.
question. Of course.
Yes. So in these settings, I want to connect with people too, but I don't want to just start opening my chat and clicking on links. So any suggestions you have for me around how I can connect with people who maybe dropped their information in the chat that I wouldn't be able to get to?
I'm going to drop your LinkedIn in the chat if that's okay, if I have your consent, and then everyone connect with Erika. How about that? So they can reach out to you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Cool. So let's move on to continue thinking about strategy. Let's see here. Let's move on to this one. Does your strategy goal setting advice also apply to those outside of the corporate 9-to-5 world? For example, freelancers, entrepreneurs, gig workers, etc. And do you have any resources that you recommend to help non-traditional workers with such planning? So again, does your strategy goal setting advice also apply to those outside of the corporate 9-to-5 world? We'll start there.
Okay. I was going to say that was a lot of questions, I think. All right. So thank you for helping with that. So when it comes to strategies for entrepreneurs, freelancers, that's very different in comparison to a career management strategy, because you are going from working for someone else to being self-employed. What I will say is a common denominator is you are responsible for your brand and building it, whether you work for someone or not. Everyone has a brand. In terms of goal setting, that is the same, because whether you set a goal for yourself or you set a goal for yourself as an entrepreneur, it's still the same principle. So that would be writing down the goal, making it measurable and time bound, identifying obstacles, considering how you can overcome those obstacles, monitoring your progress, and definitely, I would say, celebrating the achievement of the goal. Sometimes we get in this, grind hustle mentality, and it's like on to the next, but take a minute and celebrate the work that you put in, the accomplishment. And I would also add, when it comes to goal setting and strategy, get yourself an accountability partner if you have one. It makes a tremendous difference.
Yes. I love that. And I believe you touched on this, but I'll read the second part of the question in case you have anything else to add. Do you have any resources that you recommend to help non-traditional workers with such planning? So for non-traditional workers like freelancers, entrepreneurs, and gig workers, do you have any resources that you recommend?
In terms of planning strategy?
Yeah.
That's
and goal setting.
And goal setting. Well, I would say that's such a tough question, because if you are, let's say, just starting out as an entrepreneur, one of the things that I did was I Googled one-page business template to help me identify what it was that I needed to do to set myself up for success. When it comes to strategies, are you talking marketing strategy? Are you talking sales strategy? Are you talking automation? I mean, there's so many different things, and depending on what your business is, I would recommend, though, especially if you have something that's more specific that we can dig into, and you've connected with me on LinkedIn, just send me a question so I can make sure that I answer your question properly, because it's so broad. I don't want to, again, give out information that's not useful for the person who posed the question.
Thank you. And also I dropped Erika's LinkedIn right now in the chat. So feel free to connect with Erika on LinkedIn with any further questions, as we do have about 15 minutes left. So I'm going to get to some more previously submitted questions, but please raise your hand or let me know that you'd like to hop off mute if you do want to hop off mute before our time ends. So let's move on to some self-advocacy questions here. All right, there's so many to choose from.
I was going to say self-advocacy.
Here it is. This is a good one. How can I be more proactive about networking and gain visibility with senior leadership?
It's a good question. One of the things you can do if you haven't already, for the person who posed that question, is to figure out how to work on projects they are leading. I would also say, and this is something that a lot of people shy away from because they're intimidated by title, is introduce yourself. One of the best ways to get the attention of senior leadership is to work in such a way that you have allies and advocates who are talking about you to those individuals. And then when you engage those senior leaders, they say, I've heard about you.
I love that. That is, you're clearly bringing this up because you've probably seen this happen, or it's happened to in your own experience. Because sometimes when you say that, it's like kind of like, oh, that's very utopian. When is that going to happen? But it happens, right? It's like, the power of social capital, as some folks call it, or just speaking it into existence, even, right? So making those 6 degrees of separation by getting things out of your head and speaking about what you're building, what your goals are, what your passions are, connecting with folks, with making meaningful connections. And this super saturated social media landscape, you're going to stand out, at least a little bit. So thank you for that.
Oh, and I'd like to share too, and you're welcome. So it has happened to me in my career. And one of the things that came to mind as you were speaking is, in my last full-time role as a client service consultant, one of the things that I did was I helped people in my facility transition out of their roles and into new ones. And I had a waiting list for like 2 or 3 years because I would help them when I wasn't doing my full-time responsibilities, my women's employee resource group initiatives. Because I'd helped so many people, it got back to senior leadership. And I wasn't concerned about that at all. I had no problem with that. Senior leadership then started coming to me to help them. Not only that, when we had events at our facility for our line of business, and we were talking about even some of the career resources internal to the organization that I was familiar with that other people were not, I was counted on to speak to those things. So when I talk about showing up in such a way that you will attract those individuals to you, I can't tell you what that did, not just for my visibility, but even in terms of being recognized, being nominated for an emerging business leaders program with the local chamber. Then from a business perspective, the local chamber ended up being one of my clients. I mean, it's crazy. How this stuff happens. But again, you want to show up in such a way that you're not just seeking out social capital, but that you're also attracting it. And I feel like I have to say this part too, because it sounds like I was doing a lot, and I was, but it was manageable for me. And as we navigate this pandemic where burnout numbers are on the rise, I am not encouraging anyone to be overworked and to go harder than you feel like you need to. What I am saying is be strategic about how you show up. And again, how you package your expertise and your brand.
I'm just going to share my little emotional intelligence spiel on that, because it's about that self-awareness, right? So I love that you're highlighting, like, do not overburden yourself, right? So you to know your limits, and in order to learn our limits and our boundaries, we have to connect with ourselves more. We have to know, okay, what is triggering? What's going to, what is my body saying? Because a lot of what professionals are saying about burnout is that your body shows those signs first. And maybe we ignore those signs, right? So connecting with ourself, self-awareness is key. Self-love is the key of all keys. And so that we know, when to say no, and no is a full sentence. No, period. that's a full sentence. And when we, can understand that this is a partnership with whatever we are looking for, that we aren't just getting, we are also receiving, and sharing, we're sharing. And so it should be, balanced to that respect. And with that said, I'd love to speak to this next question that is asking about mentorship for self-advocacy here. So it says, my company doesn't offer or encourage mentorship. Is it smarter to self-advocate for this or save my breath and independently seek this outside of my organization?
Well, first, I'll say it's really unfortunate that the organization does not encourage mentorship. Secondly, I will say definitely seek it out elsewhere, even if the company did encourage it. As I mentioned earlier, with the relationship goals example that I shared from my course with, networking horizontally, internally, vertically, and externally. Don't be afraid to go outside of your comfort zone and the virtual four walls or physical four walls to get what it is you need to help you succeed. And so many times people will say, well, I need a mentor. No one person can be all things to you and for you. If you have the capacity, have more than one mentor. But definitely, if you can't get it inside of the organization, I would make it a point to go external to the organization. Also, because this was a part of the question and I don't want to ignore it, should you just save your breath? Is this a culture thing or is this an individual thing? Meaning there's some challenges with your leader or that line of business. And if that is the case, there could still be an opportunity for you to seek mentorship internally, but just be really clear on whether or not this is a culture thing, a company thing, or just you feeling the impact of this based on where you sit in the organization.
I agree. And I think that, if we spend for this person, because I know that time is of the essence for everyone, but if you take maybe 10 minutes and find like some really hardcore data points on why mentorship is important for the individual, for the company, for, so many there, you could probably build a case. And, if you want to save your breath, maybe you can just send that in a nice, message and see who wants to, support that. I think a lot of folks are driven by data these days. So if you don't really know how to say it, just, do some quick intentional searches and find some data points that will advocate for mentorship at your organization. All right, so let's move on. Yeah.
And I was going to say, and then don't be surprised if you're asked to lead that initiative.
Yeah. Well, and then that's another check-in, right? Do I have the capacity? Yes. Being self-aware. Is this something that I just need, or do I want to offer it and not over giving, right? Because then we get into burnout, we hold resentment. It can get into a really slippery slope. So checking in first, that emotional intelligence piece, and then communicating that, right? In a nice way. Not in a nice way, in the best way. I shouldn't say nice way, in the best way.
You better coach us.
Yes. I'm trying to be mindful of my language. It's a ever growing opportunity to share, and it happens live. So, I'm human, I make mistakes, and I think that's when we can all grow together.
Yes.
So we've got about 8 minutes left. I do want to touch on this question here, as I think this person is actually going through an interview right now. So hopefully they get to hear this response. All right. So this question reads, I've never negotiated a salary or sign-on bonus, but I'm completing a final interview this week. How would you approach the topic of a sign-on bonus and a higher salary?
Ooh. So congratulations on your interviews. And it seems like you're really close to getting an offer and anticipating one. I would say, for me, if I were in your shoes, my first step would be, let me see if signing bonuses are traditionally offered based on where I'm going. In the event that they are or are not, because you're interested in negotiating salary, you will still need to be clear on the value of your market seat. So make sure you do your due diligence around researching how much is this seat worth in the marketplace. Then when it's time for you to have the conversation, once you've received the offer, you are aware of, yes, I meet the expectations for this role. This is why you should pay me even more than what you've offered, right? So you want to also make sure not just that you know how much you want to make, but also what your walkaway point is. because you don't want to say yes to compensation that's not acceptable for you. In addition, you want to be clear knowing what else you will take in lieu of not getting the salary you want. So a lot of times when we come to these conversations, it's like, I want more money. Okay, but let's say you could get more time off, more PTO. Maybe they will pay for that coach that you don't want to pay for or can't afford to pay for out of pocket. So there's so many other different things that you can negotiate for. But what I will also say is, as you are thinking about how to build and prepare your case and articulate your value, that you make sure that you are prepared to counter offer. Someone recently that I work with, she went through the hiring process. It was a different role. She wanted to work in HR. She figured out how much money she wanted to make. She asked, they gave her exactly what she asked for. And then she said, I lowballed myself. And I said, well, why didn't you ask for more money? And she was like, I just didn't think I could. And I wasn't sure what to say. So before you get into these money talks, do your due diligence. Again, knowing how much this seat is worth, knowing how much you're worth, building your case to say, if you're looking for someone to fill these boxes, I fill these boxes and more. And then make sure that you're prepared to counter offer, so that you've identified clearly what a win is for you and whether or not you should give it your yes.
I love that. And also to demystify that, because we talk about this often on these chats where, especially for women, women are less likely to, or studies show actually that women are less likely to apply if they don't meet 100% of the requirements. And so I can see how maybe that could also lead to, oh, I'm not worth this much financially. But do you have any words on that, just to demystify that as well? Because it doesn't just stop there with applying, because obviously if you apply and you don't meet 100% of the requirements, which who does actually, and then you get an offer, to not, let that residue influence you not asking for money because you feel like you didn't meet all of the requirements. Can you speak to that?
Yes. And thank you for asking. First, if you are interested in a role, you do not have to meet all of the requirements. And that's not to say, right, out of 10 bullets, you meet one and you're like, yes, that's me. Let's be honest with ourselves and let's be reasonable. But the point is, don't talk yourself out of an opportunity when you clearly believe you could do this job. There is a such thing as onboarding. Companies will give you the tools and resources that will allow you to get up to speed in a reasonable amount of time. So don't talk yourself out of an opportunity, but also if a company interviews you for a role, 9 times out of 10, they believe you can do the job. Leaders, recruiters do not have time to waste talking to applicants and candidates that they're not planning on extending an offer to. So because you're being interviewed, it is believed you can do the job. You need to believe that as well. Do not settle for less money because you have never done the job. The fact that you're having these conversations means they believe you can do it. You need to believe you can do it and ask to be compensated accordingly. Because once you get in, and if the organization has, bonuses, raises that they give 2 to 3%, and you come in on the low end, it will take you forever, if you ever get up to market value of your seat at that rate. It's very hard to recover when you've come in on the low end.
Right. I feel like sometimes we have this like short term, need a job now, gonna of course you do what you have to do. And we all, we need to earn a living. But I think that these tips are very, valuable to keep in mind, as I know lots of folks are looking to career pivot or looking to, transition within their current organization. So we've got about 3 minutes left, and I would love for you to remind us how we can connect with you, and just leave us with some food for thought. We did have a question come in live regarding self-advocacy, how you've successfully coached people to get them to move from a headspace of arrogance to self-appreciation. And I'll also add from a headspace of undervaluing themselves to self-appreciation. So can you just speak to maybe, why you're excited to offer the work that you are doing as a coach, and remind us how we can connect with you. Thank you so much for being here, Erika. Folks in the chat box are saying this has been a great session. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I would say when it comes to people moving from the headspace of being self-arrogant and the work that I do in this space, it is because I have yet to meet an individual who did not want to do better and be better for themselves and or for their families or someone else. Like there is a bigger why, and they've worked so hard to, get the credentials to perform at work. People deserve to do something that is rewarding for them day to day and be compensated fairly for it. So if that means I get to sit in a seat and have a conversation with you and ask you some uncomfortable questions, give you some strategies, talk about language you can use in a way that works best for you so that you can consider to move yourself, your family, your community, your organization forward, I count it a blessing to be able to do that. So thank you. Oh, you said, how can people get in contact with me? How could I forget that part? Okay. So thank you for dropping my LinkedIn information in the chat. I do have some complimentary career courses on my online course platform. That's confidentcareerwoman.com. For anyone who's interested in joining the Patreon community, you just go to Patreon, type in Erika Spradley. You can find that information there. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me at Confident Career Woman.
Beautiful. And remember, if you signed up for this chat, be looking out for a rewatched email. We'll include these links so that you can directly support Erika and reach out if you want to join her with the work that she's doing, or you want, her to coach you. But I really appreciate everyone for dropping so many reflections and questions in the chat live. This has been a really phenomenal group. We are at our time, so hopefully we can get Erika back, and hopefully you can connect with each other as well, as I see a lot of you are doing some exchanging of information in the chat. So Erika, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your encouragement, for your energy, and good luck everyone with all of the things. Lots of things are happening at once, but just to echo what Erika is saying, you deserve it. Put your best foot forward, be your authentic self, and make sure that you pay it back, pay it forward, pay it back, pay it always, in between, up and down, inwards, outwards, all around, so we can continue on with this good work. So thank you.